What's up, guys? Mitch here. I want to walk you all through a basic model. So for any of you interested in real estate and want to learn how to underwrite, I think this will be really valuable for you. So to get the most out of it, just pull up your own Excel, do everything I do, follow along. If I ever get ahead of you, just pause the video, catch up. And yeah, let's just start from the bottom here. So I'm going to share my screen. So the first thing you do when you underwrite is we lay out our critical assumptions. So I've got a couple up here. Start with closing costs, property operating metrics, capital expense metrics, loan metrics, sale metrics, and return metrics. As I go through this, I'm going to try to give you guys some tips on little shortcuts I like to use. So what I'm doing right now to jump from each of these line items is just control arrow. That way you don't have to, you know what I mean? It takes really long. So control up, control down. So starting with closing costs, we've got purchase price. Let's see, actual closing costs, costos. And then we've got acquisition dates. I can't spell it in. Let's actually, here, let's do this. Let's format these real quick just to make these a little easier to not get lost. Let's grab this and format all these, make it a little easier on the eyes. So for property operating metrics, our important assumptions are property square footage. Got gross potential rent per square foot per year, general vacancy, annual rent growth, expenses square foot per year, annual expense growth. Let's actually grab all these. So I'm just holding the control button and shifting over on all these, and then I'm just going to go merge and center these so we can enter in our assumption in this column B. Let's see, anything else? Okay, I think that's it. Anytime you guys want to delete a row, just do shift space. That'll highlight the entire row, and then just control minus. So we just got rid of a row. Moving on to capital expense metrics. So capital expense reserve per square foot per year. We'll want capital expense reserve growth per year. So this is a really good shortcut you guys need to learn. Anytime you want to respace a column, just Alt HOI, H-O-I, and it'll respace it for you. That way you don't have to go figure out how to respace it. That takes a long time. We've got leasing commissions. Leasing commissions. Oops. Timing. Tenant improvements. Tenant improvements timing. Okay, let's jump into loan metrics. So we need to know how much loan we're going to get, the loan fees, and this is as a percentage of the loan amount. We need to know the interest rate. We need to know amortization, how long it's going to amortize. Let's do a shift space, and then to add a row, control shift plus. Whoops. Wherever you do it though, it's gonna make that row above where you're highlighted. So there we go. Sale metrics. Oops. Let's go with exit cap rate. We're also going to need to know the costs of sale. Okay, and then finally return metrics. And let's actually make this a different color so we don't get mixed up. like that. So we've got going in cap rate, levered IRR, levered equity multiple. So levered just means after debt. If you had an unlevered IRR or unlevered equity multiple, that would be without considering the debt on the project. And then average levered cash on cash return. Okay, we can pretty this up by adding some borders. So if you just highlight what you want, you can just do Alt HBS. So that does an outside border. And if you can't remember that, just remember Alt. And then it will always show you the shortcuts for all these different options in Excel. So I want to go to the home bar. So H, I know I want to put a border on it. So I look, okay, this is where I would click to make a border, and it says B. So I'll just click the B. And then there's all these different options. So if I wanted a thick border, thick bottom border, I could do H instead. See how it's thick now, but I just want regular outside borders. And then if you don't want to do that over and over again, just highlight what you want, hold the control button, and then do it and check it out. So we've got all that highlighted or formatted in a pretty way how we like it. Okay, let's enter in some assumptions. Oh, yeah. So let's say our purchase price is $6,750,000. Closing costs, we're going to say 75,000. Acquisition date. So let's hit Control-1. We want to format this as date. So we'll click that formatting. And now we should just be able to put in, let's call it January 31st of this year. Okay, property square footage, let's go 20,000. Gross potential rent per square foot per year. So how much we can make for each of those square feet on the property. Let's call it 34 bucks a square foot. In real estate, we're never going to be 100% occupied. We're always going to have vacancy. So that's our vacancy rate. We'll call it 8%. And our rents every year are going to grow. We're not just going to keep charging people the same thing year after year. So we'll have a rent growth of 3% is usually standard. Some markets are hot and are a lot more than 3. A lot of markets can be under 3, but 3 is pretty standard and it's safe. And I always like to match my expense growth with my rent growth, unless I have a dang good reason not to. This is also a pretty standard thing to do for most shops. And then we'll call our expenses per square foot 12 bucks. So if we just do a little bit of math here, 12 divided by 34. So we have a 35% expense margin. So of every dollar that we make on rent, 35% of that dollar, or 35 cents, is being paid to expenses. Okay, moving on to capital expense metrics. So it's good to have a capital expense reserve in case your roof goes out, you get a hole. Anything happens that isn't a regular expense is typically a capital expense. We're going to grow this reserve also by 3% per year. Leasing commissions. So, this is for a broker to find a tenant per se. That costs money. They're going to charge for that. So let's say leasing commissions are 25,000. And I guess those could also come in the form of concessions, but timing. So let's say that we're going to get that, or that leasing commission timing is going to be charged in the 4th year of our pro forma. A cool little trick is just hit Control-1. Now, if you go down to custom, click here, you can do quotations and you can type in a custom data point that you want to show. So now if we click OK, you'll see that it says year 4. But if you come up to here, the value is still just 4. But it just looks better. Because maybe somebody would get confused by the 4 and think, oh, is it in month 4 or is it in year 4? And then if you just go to home, click this little format painter, then we should be able to click this box. And now if I just hit 4, it does it for me already. So Format Painter is a really powerful tool. Let's say I want this over here to look like this. I can just highlight that, go over to Format Painter, click where I want it, and boom. So Control Z, anytime you do something you don't want to do, or you want to go back, just hit Control Z. Tenant improvements. So tenant improvements, basically someone comes into your space and you give them a little bit of allowance to put up a wall, make changes to the unit to better adapt to what they're trying to do. So we'll call it tenant improvements 15,000. Okay, perfect. Jumping down to loan metrics, we're going to assume that we get loaned $5 million. So we can figure out what our loan to value would be. We just take 5 million divided by 750,000. So our loan to value is just under 75% LTV. So about 75% of our project is being funded through debt. The other 25% therefore is equity. Loan fees, we're going to assume 1% of this loan amount is what the lenders are going to make in the form of a fee. And they're also going to make interest on the loan. It's called 5.25. Amortization, it's going to amortize over 30 years. Once again, let's make this custom, make it a little prettier, and make it say years. Okay, and then exit cap rate, we can talk a little bit about this more. I'll jump more into it later, but for now, we'll call that 6%. Cost of sale, to hire a broker to sell our property, maybe they take 3% of the purchase price. And then these are our return metrics. So this is what we're trying to back into. That's the whole purpose of this. Say where you're working, they won't take a deal anything less than an 18% IRR, 2.2 or 2.25 on an equity multiple, and 9% cash on cash return. So you guys are going to find the deal. You're going to make critical assumptions about the deal. You're going to do research, collect rent comps to figure out what you can charge, get expense comps, land comps, tax comps, basically get everything you need to see if you can make that deal work with what that firm's targeted return metrics are. And if you can't hit those return metrics, then you're going to call it a pass when you present it to an investment committee. Okay, let's start building out this pro forma. So got the year ending. Okay, we'll call this 0. First year, second year, we'll just grow this. So if you just shift over and then hit Control R, oh, whoops. Sometimes I've noticed you have to play with this to get it to recognize the pattern you want sometimes. But if you just highlight a pattern and then hit Control R, that's how you copy by column, and then copying by row is Control D. So let's respace this, Alt HOI, and then year ending. Let's go equals our acquisition date. Okay, and then we're going to do a EO month calculation, which returns the serial number of the last day of the month before or after a specified number of months. So EO month, start date is our previous date. Guys, I'm really glad I thought about this because I just made a super big mistake. Never use the column of year 0. The reason we keep year 0 on the pro forma is for the sake of underwriting in our purchase price, our closing cost, as well as loan metrics and repaying the loan. And you'll see what I mean in a minute, but don't do what I just did. Leave column 0 completely open for now. Don't touch it. So we got to start in year 1. I mean, I guess you can date it. We can call this the previous year. Let's call this one. Yeah, let's actually start January 1st of 2022. So we can keep going the direction we were going, but yeah, don't use the first column. So start date is the previous date, and then we want to go to 12 months after that previous date. And it's wacky because this isn't formatted as a date yet, so I'm just going to hit Control-1. We go to date. Okay, see how that turned into a date? Now I should be able to copy over this formula, Alt-HOI, and you see every year it's the 1st of January of the next year. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, let's format this, pretty up a little bit, just how we did over to the left. And then let's start getting our line items in here. So the first thing you have in a pro forma is your gross potential revenue. And then you're going to have vacancy. You're going to take that vacancy from your gross potential revenue to get to effective gross income. I guess the better lingo is actually EGR, effective gross revenue. And then you'll have operating expenses. Once we take out this operating expenses, that'll get us to net operating income. And then we're going to have a couple things that fall under capital expenses. So that'd be like these leasing commissions, the tenant improvement allowances, and capital expense reserves. The total of these will get us to our total expenses. And then we'll have a cash flow before debt service. Yeah, so that'll be our cash flow before debt. And then we need to get into our debt. So we'll have principal payment, which is principal is that part of the loan that you're actually paying back. Oh, by the way, just a bold, Control B. You can also underline Control U. And then we have an interest payment as well. And these two things put together is what makes up your debt service. I'll call this total debt service. Once you apply your debt service to your cash flow before debt service, we'll call that cash flow after debt service. And then we're gonna account for those things I was telling you, which will go in the column 0. So we gotta think about our purchase price, closing costs. Sorry, I don't want this bolded. Sale proceeds, cost of sale. And then once we account for all that, we'll have our total unlevered cash flows. And then we will enter in our debt, bring that into the equation. So loan proceeds, loan fees, loan payoff. And that will get us a total levered cash flows. And then we'll leave a little space down here for cash on cash return equation. Cash on cash return is a yield. So let's just structure this right now as a percent. So Control-1, percentage. Yeah, we can keep 2 decimal places. Okay, and then let's put an outside border on all this real quick. Alt-HBS. Let's give this guy a little border. Alt-HBS. Let's format these a little prettier. Let's right align everything. And then if it's a major line item, we will center align. And like, this might not seem important to you guys, but it's super important to keep things just looking pretty, looking presentable. So just keep that in mind. And then, yeah, let's keep going and actually make it even a little bit more presentable. So So I'm just shifting over. Let's give all of our line items. Actually, before we give them an outside border, let's highlight everything in here and format it how we're going to want it. Because if you forget to do this before you start inputting stuff, then everything you do, or you just have to wait till the end, you have to change to currency. So let's change this to currency. Right here, it's asking, what do you want to do? How do you want to show negative numbers? Because there's lots of different ways that you can show it. I like to show negative numbers in red and in parentheses because it's obvious. It's like that's a negative number. So I'm going to choose that one. So now if I just type in -5, see that it shows 5, it's red, it's in parentheses, like you can't miss it. It's an expense. Okay, perfect. Let's finish making this aesthetically pleasing. Give these some borders. Go ahead and do that with me. And then honestly, I feel like the bulk of the work is getting this thing like formatted, getting everything laid out. That's kind of what takes the longest. It really doesn't take too long to actually do the underwriting because we really haven't even started the underwriting. We've just been formatting this thing, laying out our assumptions. But yeah. Okay. Let's do this. So starting in year 1. So we're going to do our gross potential revenue. To find that, we're going to take our property square footage. Anytime you're grabbing a assumption that, and you're going to be copying things over, then you need to anchor it so that it doesn't move. So to anchor, you just do FN and F4. That's super important. So we need to find our property square footage and multiply that by our gross potential rent per square foot per year, which we're also gonna make sticky. So that gives us 680,000. And then over here, this is year 2, right? So is year 2 going to be the same revenue? No, because like we talked about, our rents grow every year. So we're going to reference our past year's revenue. We don't want to make it sticky because we're going to want to copy everything over, and we want that cell F3 to be able to shift each time we copy. So you don't have to make it sticky in that case, but when we apply a growth rate, you're going to make the growth rate sticky. So we're going to do 680,000 times 1 plus, because you're saying, okay, take 100% of 680,000 and actually take 3% more on top of that. So we just selected B10, which is our annual rent growth rate. So it's going to do 680,000 times 1.03, if that makes sense. And we're going to raise that to the year that it falls under. We don't want to make that sticky either because we want it to be able to move. Actually, I don't think you have to do this. Sometimes you can do it. I guess it's up to you. Okay, now we should be able to copy everything over. Control R, Alt HOI, and voila, we have our gross potential revenue for our entire hold period. I don't think I mentioned this yet, but our hold period is going to be 10 years. You notice that I have this 11th year right here. I'll explain why we need that in a second, but whatever your hold period is, always do a forward year on top of that hold period. And I'll show you why in just a minute. But yeah, we're good on our gross potential revenue. So let's talk about our vacancy. So we have this vacancy rate over here, 8%, right? So to find that, we're just going to take 8% of our gross potential revenue. So grab this guy from above. And before you start, you're going to want to make it negative because vacancy is an expense, right? So negative, cell F3, and then apply our rate of 8%. Make that sticky. Boom, 54,400. Should be able to copy everything over. Control R. Okay, we are good there. And now effective gross revenue is just your gross potential revenue less or minus vacancy. So because I like to format things as negatives, anytime I have an expense, I just have to sum the expense. So 625,600 is going to be our effective gross revenue. Control R. Okay. Now we have some operating expenses, right? So to find operating expenses, it's pretty similar. So let's go over and figure out what our square footage is. So 20,000 square feet. And we're going to apply our expense per square foot per year, which is this guy. So we know our operating expenses are, what I forgot the negative. So we want to show that operating expenses are an expense. So 240,000. But like we learned in the past problem, our expenses grow along with our rents. So like we talked about, we're using the same rate to find that. You should be able to copy all that over, Alt HOI, and we should be good there. See that? Okay, then net operating income is just your effective gross income less your operating expenses. So we can sum these together to get to an NOI of 385,600. Let's get the rest of them. Okay, perfect. This is as far as you need to go with your forward year. So don't worry about doing anything else in these boxes. This is what we needed to get for that forward year. And once again, I'll explain why in just a second. But yeah, don't go any further. So now let's jump into leasing commissions. So let's write a little equation here. Okay, we're going to do if the year that we're in is equal to the year that our leasing commission timing is, then return our leasing commission. And you're going to want to do negative, return a negative leasing commission. Else return nothing. So what this is saying is if the year is year 4, if F1 is equal to B18, return negative B17. And then just for good practice, let's make these sticky. And if it's not equal to year 4, if the year we're in is not year 4, return nothing. Okay, see that? So now we should be able to copy this all the way over, Control R, check it out. So we just got our leasing commission timing right there. And the reason why it's important to learn how to do formulas like this is because when you're actually when you're underwriting at a higher level, you're not going to be underwriting in just annually for 10 years. Like things are broken out monthly. And so it gets really granular, and there's a lot more that happens in different months than just a leasing commission or a tenant improvement. There can be dozens and dozens of things that occur at any given time based on a construction schedule, like if you're in development. So it's important to write the equations like this, so you don't have to manually go through and do the whole thing. If you do it right, they'll go in the correct place, the correct time where they should be. So we'll do the same thing with tenants improvement allowances. So if the year is equal to the year in which the tenant improvements happen, oops, make that sticky, FN F4 to anchor things, then return a negative 15,000. Else return nothing. So we should get another expense in that year 4. Sweet, but why isn't it showing up negative? That's weird. Oh, I'm wondering if this didn't end up keeping, no, it does. So it's not thinking it's negative. Let's just try putting this negative at the beginning of the if formula. See if you can figure out what my issue, guys, is before I find out. pause it just for a minute so I can figure out what this is. All right, guys, I made a classic blunder. So hopefully you were able to catch what I did wrong. It's super simple. But as I click on this formula, go if something ever isn't right, just go over to where it is. What's wrong here? So CE19 is just off in the middle of like nowhere. And why? That's because I didn't anchor in my original calculation. Guys, that's why anchoring is so important, because if you don't anchor them when you copy over each time, that B19 is just going to keep shifting over every time. So let's fix that. FN F4, perfect. Now when we copy it over, should be a negative 15,000. Perfect. Now let's do capital reserve expenses. So equals, we know how many square feet we have. Let's multiply that by that $1 per year. So we should have, once again, forgot to put the negative, do that so it shows up as an expense. And then in year 2, we're going to grow this number because we are using a capital expense reserve growth rate. Let's anchor that. And you got to use the parentheses. There we go. 20,600 is how much that expense will grow. Let's copy that all the way over. Perfect. Oh, like I said, we don't need to go that far anymore. Okay. Now, total capital expenses. We should just be able to sum up all this. Okay, there you go. Let's get into our cash flow before debt service. So all we do to find this is take the sum of our net operating income and those total capital expenses. Control R. Okay, there we go. Now let's get into our debt. This is where it gets fun. Also, I forgot something that's like really best practice. Anytime you have a model and you make an assumption, always put those assumptions in blue. And I'm not sure exactly what shade they use. I'm pretty sure it's this one though. So I just find this sky blue guy over 1, 2, 3, and then up left. Now you can make that easier on yourself if you go to the Wall Street Journal macros, Excel macros. They have an underwriting macro that you can install in your Excel, and then you could just hit Control B, Control Blue. It'll turn all that into blue. It just has a lot of better tricks that don't come in the regular Excel version. So if you're interested in that, I guess I'll drop the link in this YouTube video at the bottom. Okay, but yeah, let's jump into our principal. So we're going to go cum prints and let's go find our rate. So let's talk about this real quick. So a cumulative principal formula returns the cumulative principal paid on a loan between 2 periods. So first we're going to grab our rate and we're going to, right now that rate is annualized. We want to make it monthly. So we're going to divide that by 12. And once again, don't forget to anchor everything. And then your number of periods is 30 because 30 years for the amortization. Let's anchor this. And we also want to make this monthly. So we're going to multiply 30 by 12. And then present value is our loan amount. We can make that negative. Our present value. Start period. We're going to grab our year. Let's lock it by the row, not the column. So you can actually lock things in different ways. So this is by row and column. Now it's locked by row. Now it's locked by column. We're going to do this one. We're going to multiply it by 12 minus 11. And then we're going to grab the period again. We're going to multiply it by 12. And then type, we want to do end of the period. Okay, I messed up on something. Let's see if I can figure out what I did here. So cumulative prints, we've got our rate. We've got our number of periods, and we've made it monthly. Oh, that's what I did wrong. I don't think this should be negative. There we go. Here, real quick. I don't like all these decimal places. Let's grab all this real quick. Control 1. We're just gonna go to 0 decimal places. Okay, that's a lot prettier, right? So yeah, we've got this principal payment is exactly what we're paying in principal for year 1 of our whole period. Just to explain this a little more. So like the equation said, it's taking the cumulative principal between 2 periods. So that's what this is. We're designating these periods. So I'm saying multiply year 1 by 12 minus 11, which is 1. So it's giving us the first month of our first year. And then I'm doing the year times 12 to get to the 12th month of year 1. So the 2 periods are month 1 and month 12 of year 1. So hopefully I can illustrate a little bit better. If we go over here to column K and we go into here, it's doing it correctly because it's taking, okay, take year 6, multiply 6 times 1. That's the beginning of our period. Let's see. And then take K1 times 12. So 12 times 60 is whatever it is, 78. So yeah, it's saying the end period is the 78th month, and it's saying the first period is the 60th, or whatever 6 times 12 is. Let's see here. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Let's jump into interest payment. So we're going to use a cumulative IPMT and same process here. So we'll have our interest rate, anchor it. Number of periods is 30. Anchor. Present value 5 million. And then you're going to use the same idea here. Start period. 12 minus 11. End period. Times 12. 0. Okay, so 262,371 should be more or less close. Let me check to make sure that this is correct. So maybe you guys caught my error once again, just silly error, and that's fine. Things like that happen when you underwrite, and you just have to figure out what you did wrong. So for some weird reason, I divided my rate by 12 to get a monthly rate, and then I multiplied 30 by 30. So I need to multiply the amortization period of 30 years by 12 months to make it monthly. That's where I was going wrong. But then should be able to copy that over. And just to explain this a little bit more, I don't know if I understand like 100% the perfect science of it, but normally like you would make an amortization table on another sheet, but this is a good shortcut to not having to make a whole nother sheet and build out an amortization table. So I told you wrong. The 2 time periods are, so it's saying take F1, which is year 1, multiply it by 12. That's our second period, which is 12 months. Our first period is take that 1, multiply it by 1. So our starting period is month 1, and it is always month 1 in the calculation. So if you go look at row M, so in year 8, our starting period for this calculation is still, let's see, oh no, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the exact science of it, but that would mean the starting period is month 8. Yeah, that doesn't make total sense to me, but this is kind of how they do it. So keep that in mind. Let's keep going. So then we add these two numbers to get a total debt service. And notice how that debt service is the same the whole way through. And that's exactly how it should be. That debt service doesn't change. It's like your monthly payment on a house, for example. It's the same throughout the whole 30 years of amortization. What is changing, if we analyze this, is our principal payment is going up. So over time, we're paying more of the loan off per hold period, while the interest rate is falling, or the interest payment is falling. So over time, we pay less of an interest payment and more in principal payment. And that's what amortizing is. You're paying down the loan. Cool. So we've got our total debt service, and then we can get our cash flow after debt service. So that's just the sum of our cash flow before debt service and our total debt service. So we get 34,278. Let's copy all that over. Okay, cool. Now we can start talking about this stuff, which is really fun. So now this is why we left a year 0 to be able to input this. So our purchase price was 6,750,000. Make that negative. Don't forget to anchor. It's always a good practice. And our closing costs, let's see, we said we're 75,000. So we've got both those in. Both those occur in year 0 because we buy the property, we pay the closing costs, and then our hold starts. And then we can talk about sale proceeds. Okay. So this is where this forward year comes into play. Sale proceeds is how much we're going to sell the property for at the end of our hold period, what we're going to get back, right? And this is why we needed to do this, because we need this forward year NOI to be able to determine what our property is worth. So the cap rate formula is simply net operating income divided by your purchase price. We don't have the purchase price. We're trying to do the opposite and find the cap rate, find the purchase price with a market cap rate we already have. So we're assuming we can exit at 6%. So that should get us to our purchase price. Let's actually stop for a minute and break down what a cap rate is real quick. So I'm just going to go to draw. Pen here. Okay, so the cap rate calculation is your NOI divided by your purchase price, which is equal to your cap rate, correct? But you can also rewrite this. Say you only have a purchase price and a cap rate, and you want to find out what your net operating income is. You can multiply these together. So purchase price times cap rate is equal to NOI. Let's say you need the purchase price, like in our situation, you can just interchange these and write it to say NOI divided by cap rate is equal to purchase price. Let's talk about what these actually are. So at a high level, cap rate is just the return. Scroll down here. So cap rate is simply like the return that you can make on a project, but it doesn't take into account debt or anything, because if the cap rate uses NOI to solve for a purchase price, then naturally this is as far as it goes. Oh, sorry, I need to get my pen out again. Come on, anything. There we go. So yeah, it only goes to here. It only goes to the net operating income. So you give me one, just one sec, guys. So yeah, as I was saying, cap rate is simply a yield. So let's draw this again. So let's say you have a cap rate of 5%. All that means is the property that you're looking at can yield you 5% of the value of that property. So let's say the purchase price or the value of the property is $1 million. We know that the net operating income of this property at a 5% cap rate is, let's see, let's get off this and actually do the calculation. There you go, 50,000. So all the cap rate is saying is of that $1 million, this property is NOIing 50,000 a year. Does that make sense? So sorry, that was a little, the reason why I explained that is because so you guys can understand how we got to this purchase price. Because our forward year told us, okay, this property can make 518,000 the year after we sell it. And let's say there's similar properties in the area that are trading at a 6% cap rate, selling at a 6% cap rate. So that just means that we can back into a price for this property by multiplying or by dividing this net operating income into this cap rate. So 8,636,000 is our purchase price. This 518,000 is 6% of that purchase price. Does that make sense, guys? Hope it makes sense. Study a little bit more. Then we have our cost of sale. Actually, I'm gonna do all this because it's ugly. So I'm just Control-Z all of this. Let's erase this too. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so cost of sale. So if we go over to sell metrics, we know that cost of sale is 3%, right? So we'll take our sales price times our rate of the cost per sale. And don't forget, make it negative because it's an expense, yada, yada. Perfect. And then we're going to do our total unlevered cash flow equation. It's going to be the sum of everything from cell E24 to O27. But we also want to include this guy because we're going to include all these before debt cash flows now that we have year 0 and year 10, including our the buying of the asset and the selling of the asset, if that makes sense. So you'll see that like these cash flows are literally just what we're making, but the year 0, there's a big negative flow because we have to buy the property. And then in year 10, when we sell it, right at the end of year 10, there's also going to be a big inflow because we're going to get money for that project back. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's jump into loan proceeds. So loan proceeds is like, okay, how much money are we getting in loan? So that's just going to be equal to this 5 million. So it's an inflow, but that has a cost. To get a loan, it's not free, right? So they're charging 1%. of that loan, which is 50,000. And then loan payoff, we need to figure out, okay, at the end of 10 years, how much interest and principal have we paid? No, not interest. How much principal have we paid? And how much do we still owe back in principal on this loan? That's what loan payoff is. So let's jump over to where we're going to sell this thing in year 10 and write up a little future value equation. So we know that the rate was 5.25%. So divide that by 12. We know that our number of periods, here, let's anchor this. We know that our number of periods was 30 years. Let's multiply that by 12. Payment should be the sum of all of these. So that's how much we paid. I think that's right. No, excuse me. We're just going to use the sum of these two guys. And since we've made the rates and the amortization monthly, we also need to make this payment monthly. Oh, duh, guys, and I hope you realize why I did this, because yeah, these two numbers are just, they add up to the debt service. So I literally could have just referenced any of these or any of these added together. And then present value was the loan. So that's B23. And then end of period. Okay. We did something wrong. Let's see if we can figure out what we did wrong. Let me see if this makes a difference. If I just use that service, it did make a difference, but that's not right. So let's go back and analyze this. So anytime you guys get something wrong, step through it, try to figure out what you did wrong. So we got a rate divided by 12, number of periods times 12, taking the sum of this payment in year 10 and the interest payment, which adds up to our total payment, divided by 12. Present value of 5 million and 0. Pause the video, see if you guys can figure it out. Okay, so maybe you noticed when I made that mistake right when I was doing it, or you just found it out after pausing the video. But yeah, really simple mistake. Once again, we all do it. You guys are going to run into this. Like, why the heck am I using the amortization as my number of periods? Like, I should be using the end of our hold period. So year 10, we're in the 10th year, 120th month. Well, I guess it'd be 108th to 120th month. There we go. So now this is correct. This is how much we're going to have to pay back that we still owe on the loan after we sell. Because once again, we're just finding a future value of using that 5.25% rate made monthly. We're in year 10, make that monthly. Use this debt service, divide that by 12, so make that monthly. And the present value was 5 million. That's what they gave us for this loan. So we're using that, and that's going to tell us what's left to pay back. So 4,097,000. Okay, guys, sorry, we're almost done. Then we get to total cash flows. So if we sum, let's see. All of this and our cash flow after debt. Bring all that over. Sorry, that's not right. I actually want to grab total debt service. Yep. So you notice that these numbers, oh, that's not right. Sorry guys, let me just make sure this is correct. Okay, yeah, we're good. So you notice that these numbers right here in the middle are the same as all of these, because that is our levered cash flow, at least during the whole period. But it's the last year and the year zero that are showing different, obviously, because we have the sell, the purchase, and the sell. So yeah, we're pretty much done. We're almost there. Now we're just going to find a cash on cash return. So there's a lot of ways you could do this. I'm just going to do the cash we made here by the cash we put in the project. And then I'm going to put this negative here to keep it positive. Let's see what I did for that one. Yeah, so the cash that you made divided by what you put in is your cash on cash return. Why are you being so funky? Ah, duh, because I didn't anchor. Always make sure you guys anchor. So we want this to move, right? But we don't want the 1,875,000 to move, because that's always the amount that we put in. There we go. And then for this last cash flow, cash on cash return doesn't include the sale of your project. It's an annual measurement. So for this one, you're just going to want to go grab that levered cash flow, because these are the cash flows we're using, all these. But because this one has the loan payoff baked in, we'll just come up and grab this and then divide by negative by what we put into the project, our equity. So there we go. We have all of our average cash on cash returns for each year. Now we can figure out what that is across the board. So for the life of the project, our average levered cash on cash return was 4.47%. We can also figure out what our going in cap rate was, because we know after underwriting, we know what our first year NOI was, and we know what we bought it for. So just think back to the cap rate equation. It's just NOI divided by purchase price. Let's make this a percent. So control 1, 5.71% on the going in cap rate. So if we didn't know what to buy the property for, but we knew that the properties in the area that were similar were trading at a 5 3/4 cap rate. So let's say 5.75. And we knew from the seller that our net operating income year one would be around 385,600. Then we could figure out what we should buy it for by dividing that NOI into that cap rate, right? Let's make this a percent. Hit F and F2. That way you don't have to like use your mouse, your keypad and click in, and then you can just edit So yeah, that would leave us with really close to this number. 6,706,000. The reason for the variation obviously is because I used a 4 basis point spread off what it actually is. But if you make this 5.71, you notice it's exactly the same. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Levered IRR. So we should have a levered IRR of about control 1. Let's give this some more decimal points. You do definitely want decimal points on your return metrics. Because return metrics, just like a couple, as we just saw, a couple basis point difference on a going in cap rate, it can be like a $50,000 difference in the purchase price. And then levered equity multiple. So this one can be a little tricky. So all you do is, I like to find the sum of all our cash flows. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could do this, but I like to sum all of them up. So I know that this is the total amount of money we made on this project, 3,243,000. I also know what we put in. So if we just do what we made divided by what we put in, make this just a number. Equity multiples are shown in numbers. So this is how much equity we added on top of what we started with. But because we started with 1, it's actually 2.73, right? So you just have to write it as 1. Or after the equation, you just have to add a 1 onto it. So we had a 2.73x multiple. And we can do control 1, make this custom, and we can add in the x. See that? And we can, if you want to get rid of something or just put it somewhere else, control X, then you can go put it wherever you want. Instead of having to do control C, go do control V, go back, delete it, control X. So there we go. We're done with this basic model. Hopefully you guys learned a ton. And as you guys saw, I still make mistakes. Anytime you make a mistake or you get stuck, just stop, step back through your equation, figure out what you did wrong. Usually they're just little things like you notice. I think several of my biggest errors were just because I didn't anchor something. And I'll make another video right after this and talk a little bit more about IRR, and we can play around with that. But for now, hopefully you guys learned a ton. Watch this over and over again if you need to, and we'll see you soon.